We are now joined by Simon from Audiokinetic. How are you doing, Simon?
I'm fine, thank you.
Fantastic. I think you've just come from a talk, or you've at least done one today, yes?
Yes, just 30 minutes ago. So,
Fantastic. What was that all about?
so it was more of a keynote style thing where, and it was, the topic was harmonizing art and technology. Is it possible? Is it an actual goal, or should it stay on balance and so on? And doing that, going back the history of video games, so 50 years ago up to today, and having an outlook at the future, what it may be in the future. So yeah, it was entertaining. People were engaged, and that was fun.
Fantastic. Well, audio is what you're all about. So Audiokinetic, tell us, what is it that is? What do you do?
So Audiokinetic is the sound engine that will be part of a game engine. So to make game, you need a game engines that control all the systems together. So animation, display, AI, and you need sound. So Wise is a sound engine that is meant to be integrated into game engines. And there's an authoring application for composers and sound designers to integrate their content, to set the right behaviors, the right sound properties on those sounds, so that later, when those sounds are triggered by the game, they will play in the right manner, the right fashion, they will be mixed correctly, so you hear the right sounds at the right moment, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. So people might be familiar with something called a DAW, a digital audio workstation, where you might create and mix sounds together.
Yeah.
How does that differ from a game engine? Where in the chain do these two things come?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So DAW are mainly made for linear production, right? You use the DAW to create music or to create the sound score for a film, that kind of thing, where it's linear. And in the process, DAWs are used to create assets, to create, dialogue and clean those dialogues and music and ambience and all that. And then you output those sounds, you render those sounds as WAV file, and you integrate those audio files into Wise. And that's where it starts. Now, in Wise, that's when you add your behaviors, that's when you add your thing. Things like, for example, distance attenuation. If you do a fill, you know exactly when the character goes away, you can fade out the footsteps. But when you're in a game, you don't know how close you're going to be from that character and so on. So you need basically the game to tell what is the distance of that character with regards to the microphone capturing those sounds. And then the artist will mix the distance attenuation curves, like how much volume decay over time, how much low pass filter can be applied, high pass filters, and all those fancy stuff, so that you get something believable.
The illusion of a three-dimensional space.
Exactly. And because a million different players playing the same game, they will not be they will not have exactly the same soundtrack. They might never get close to a certain character walking, for example. Another can follow them and so on. So all the mixing aspects for game is done dynamically, is done at runtime. So that's why before the game is run, that's why you need a tool like Wise, so that you can set, okay, how far should I be hearing some characters of that size, for example, and if there's a big waterfall and so on, if you want to hear it from afar, and as you get closer, that waterfall will extend and being, more present and ominous maybe. So those things have to be created in advance, and you never know exactly how long and how close they will get to.
So do you primarily work with mobile and mobile games, or do you work with any and all? Is the platform used everywhere?
So game developers, like the budget you invest into making games is so important that typically game developers will try to port their games on as many platforms as they can, right? So there will be mobile game developers where typically they will do Android and iOS, But if you are on the console side of things, it's quite possible that you will release on the Nintendo, the PlayStation, Xbox, on PC, on Mac, maybe on mobile platforms as well, just to get your game on as many platforms as possible and reduce your financial risk, right? So that's why Wise literally supports all the gaming platform. It's really essential that we do that.
Because sound has changed in so much as, mono was a thing back in the day, a single transistor radio with one speaker. Then you get this stereo, so you can suddenly pan left and right. And now people have, Atmos surround sound systems in their homes where you can get elevation and you can get, an entire genuine 360 experience. So when you're mixing something for a small iPhone speaker, which may or may not even be in stereo, it's more likely to be stereo now, versus doing a mix for something that supports surround sound, is it a very different production workflow, or can you bake it all in and then it can just, depending on what it plugs into, it just recognizes and changes the mix?
Yeah, it's a good question. And again, the concept of baking stuff for games doesn't really apply well for the same reason I was mentioning before. You never know exactly where will be those objects, when will they be triggered, and so on. And you will have that game being played on so many different platforms, so many different sound systems. So the best practice, or the way it works with Wise, is you're actually mixing around a listener. So you're mixing your sound in a spherical thing, right? So it's not even 7.14 like Dolby Atmos, which is a hemisphere. We're mixing on a sphere with the highest precision possible. And then we try to keep that precision down to the final mix, and we send to the endpoint, so to the console or the phone, that information. And where we are at today, so back in the days, when we started recording albums, it was mono, eventually we had stereos and so on. So you were mixing in a studio with the best environment possible. Now we're at a stage where the endpoint knows best about the environment. And the endpoint will be your phone or your console or your PC or Mac. So literally what we're doing with Wise is you're trying to send all those objects with all their 3D coordinates and all the submix and all the content, you send that to the endpoint, and the endpoint knows how to play that content. It knows that, currently that person is wearing headphones. So let's do a binaural mix with all those position distinct and with independent streams. Then we can do like really better binaural effects.
Hellblade being the example of a console game which really emphasized that binaural effect with putting headphones on.
Yes.
They recommended that you did it for the 3D spatial.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And that's a game using Wise.
Good to know. Good to know. Well, that's a good sort of showcase for it.
Yeah.
There are a lot of people when you show it to folks, they kind of freak out, look over their shoulders, and that the effect is working well.
Exactly.
So this is something that you plug into existing engines. You download an additional. Is that how it works?
Yes. So there are commercial engines like Unity and Unreal, for example, and Godot now, and a lot of, and there's still a lot of proprietary game engines. Some game companies develop their own game engines. So Wise has been designed to be easily integrated into any kind of game engines. But because of the ubiquity of Unity and Unreal, we are also providing integration for these engines just to simplify the work for the developers and, having them more rapidly able to integrate their content and work on making the best experience possible.
It seems like in some ways, and this is happening with graphics a little bit, when you hit a plateau, when it's like you can't really improve the thing that you're doing anymore, because the jump from mono to entirely 360 spatial audio is huge. But once you've kind of conquered that, how do you improve that? Does it become about efficiency? Does it become about clarity or quality? How do you make it better for you?
It's I think it's there's not a single silver bullet for that, right? So it's a combination of having more clarity with your mix. And again, it's dynamic. You don't know exactly what will happen at any given moment. So it's about building the mixing rules in a way that if you have a critical dialogue to come in, it has to duck the music down and the explosion and so on. So you can capture that thing. So dynamic mixing is really important. Another aspect that is emerging more and more is to leverage the geometry around you to do dynamic early reflections and to have sound propagation, bending around walls or going through the walls and things like that.
A crude example of those Atmos speakers that fire off the ceiling.
It could be to render that, but this is at the end of the chain where you render, on that hemisphere for Dolby Atmos. But, before that, if the game sends to Wise where the walls and the openings are, now we can calculate, how a sound, an emitter from outside can go through a window.
Within the game geometry.
Within the game directly. And the effect when let's say if you have an object in your doorway, for example, so you're gonna hear it clear, but as soon as you move and you don't see that object, there's some sort of low pass filtering, happening on you. So those type of things can be created and automatically triggered. So that enhance the realism, that enhance the feeling of being present in the room.
I'm going to say something gross now, but to explain it to graphics people, kind of like ray tracing in the sense that it follows the actual path of the light and it's doing the same thing to sound.
For dynamic early reflection, we're using ray tracing for that. Yeah, and we much less than for graphics because we can get away with it. To a certain point, audio doesn't need that level of precision to render something that is really convincing. But yes, we're using ray tracing and other techniques to optimize, the memory usage, the CPU usage, because it's all in the end, it's all running, on a mobile phone or on console, and we're all sharing the same resources. So doing arts or doing sound, you're kind of sharing the same CPU, the same memory, and so on.